Good afternoon, everyone. Let me call to order this special Mayor Commission work session. Today is August 26, 2021, and the time is 2:34. And I am so excited about what we're going to hear today. No pressure panel. You probably never expected anyone to say they're excited to hear a report about water, but you all actually get excited about water, don't you? Yeah. Anyway, commissioners, as you recall, I'm sure you can't forget what we went through in May with the cyanotoxin infiltration of our water system, and about a week of where we were under an advisory. And I thought, and I did announce as we were going through that experience, that we should use this as a teaching moment. What we were going through as a surface water system was unprecedented. Certainly in our state. No other surface water system had encountered this situation before. And while I was very confident that we would be able to mitigate the infiltration and get back to normal, if you will, I did want to bring together and did call for the assemblage of a panel of experts to work with our staff and to take a deep dive into our system. There were to be no stones left unturned. Whatever information they needed, whatever data they needed, staff was instructed to share with them so that we could hopefully learn some lessons from what we had gone through. And part of their mission was to help us understand how we could, how our water system could be more resilient to algae toxins. And so today we're going to hear some short-term recommendations, and I'll let them get into it. I know there are some, their work is not complete. Let's just put it that way. And the quality of the team that was assembled, I know the term has been overused, but I'll call it our dream team when it comes to water. The members who have, many of whom have volunteered their efforts are just experts in their field. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Calcat and let them proceed with the presentation, and welcome everyone. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. I want to thank the Mayor and thank you, the Commissioners, for this special workshop. I want to thank the panelists, expert panelists. We don't have everybody here. Some of them could not travel, but very well represented, and I'll let Libby Bucky introduce them as she comes on here. But I also wanted to take the time to thank our water customers for all the patience and due diligence that they have asked us for. And town of Palm Beach, South Palm Beach, we have town staff attending some of these expert panel meetings, and we also have a representative from the town who is an expert in water industry by himself, and he's been on the panel meetings too. And actually, we took a tour of the plant 2 days ago, and he was there for that too. I want to thank our water treatment plant staff and the lab staff for all the efforts that they have made during this time to really look into our treatment, providing all the data that the expert panels needed, interviews that the panel wanted to do with the staff, and using all of that collectively to look at how can we make our system a little bit better. So I just wanted to thank everybody for the time that they've spent in here, and I appreciate all that institutional and the industry knowledge that the expert panels expert panelists have brought to our city. So Libby, I want to put it up to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Calcat. My name is Libby Bucky, and I'm president of Barney & Worth, and my firm specializes in communications for water utilities, specifically for water quality issues. I've been working with the City of Salem for 2 years on their cyanotoxin event, and I am here to help facilitate the expert panel and to provide some communication support to the city. And it's really my honor to introduce the expert panelists that the mayor convened here. You know, they're all engineers and water quality experts, treatment experts with more than 30 years of experience, not just in the nation, but around the globe. And it's been really a treat for me to be working with such a great group of scientists and engineers. I'll start with Dr. Robert Cushing. He's a senior president with Carollo Engineers, and he's nationally recognized for water treatment and water quality. He works with large utilities around the nation. He worked on numerous successful treatment facility planning and design projects. He also participates in studies and programs that improve distribution system water quality. Next to Dr. Cushing is Dr. William Becker. He directs Hazen and Sawyer's drinking water practice, and he also works with the large utilities around the nation to solve tough water quality and treatment challenges. He also teaches courses on water treatment at the University of Colorado Boulder and is affiliated with the Columbia Water Center at Columbia University. He has authored hundreds of technical presentations and publications, and has served on the Environmental Protection Agency's Science Advisory Board Drinking Water Committee. And finally, Dr. Chandra Mysore. He's unable to join us here today because of COVID protocol restrictions, but he's watching the work session right now live through live stream. He's a regional drinking water lead at Jacobs Engineering, and has provided technical direction and senior review of projects around the globe that address the exact issue that we're dealing with here at West Palm Beach, is cyanotoxins and other source water quality concerns. He also has authored more than 100 technical publications and is an active committee member with American Water Works Association and the Water Research Foundation. And with that, Dr. Becker, I invite you to the podium for the presentation.
Thanks, Libby. It's a pleasure to be here today. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you for inviting us to this forum. Let's see, a couple of introductory slides. In addition to Bob and Chandra and myself, there is a whole support staff of extremely talented people that are working alongside of us to develop these recommendations as we move forward. Just a bit of an overview, back in May of this year, there was a detection of a cyanotoxin above an EPA health advisory level, and that's now been lifted. I'll talk a little bit more about what a health advisory level actually is in a couple of minutes. But the city did take action to address the situation and protect public health. This panel that I've been part of, along with Bob and Chandra and the group, has identified near-term actions, and the panel will now look at some long-term solutions. But before I begin, I'd like to kind of give you a little bit of background about what cyanotoxins are. They are compounds that are produced by, it's commonly called blue-green algae, but they're actually cyanobacteria, which is a photosynthetic type of bacteria. It's not new. They're some of the oldest organisms on Earth. They go back billions of years, and there's about 2,000 such cyanobacteria species on the planet. Under certain conditions, these cyanobacteria, they can proliferate, and those conditions are usually like warmer temperatures, excess nutrients, that type of thing. So you commonly see them in the summer time. If not removed by treatment plant, then continued exposure to the cyanotoxins can be harmful. And what I've shown there in these diagrams is on the right. It's just some examples of some cyanotoxins and different types, and you can see there's different shapes, different morphologies to them. And then on the bottom, there's cylindrospermopsin. That's the actual cyanotoxin of concern here that was detected in May. And the other is microcystin. And for those two cyanotoxins, the EPA has developed these health advisory levels, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But water treatment, the rules for water treatment have really been evolving over the last 40, 50 years or so. The Congress passed the U.S. Safe Drinking Water Act in 1974, and that act gave EPA the authority to set water quality standards. And once EPA sets those standards, then the states must enforce standards at least as stringent as that. And to date, there's only about 100 standards that have actually been promulgated by the EPA. EPA also can publish what are called health advisories for contaminants that are not subject to national primary drinking water regulation. And what EPA did in 2015 was develop health advisories for 2 of the cyanotoxins, cylindrospermopsin and microsystems. They looked at a couple others and decided that there wasn't enough science available yet to set health advisories for those. And so the health advisory numbers that they came up with are what are called 10-day health advisory levels. And what that means is you can consume water containing the amounts shown in this table for a 10-day period with no health effects that are noticeable. Well, no health effects, I should say. And you'll see there's 2 columns. One are for bottle-fed infants and preschool children, and the others are for older kids and adults. And the reason the numbers are different is because little kids and infants consume more water per their body weight than adults do. So the governing number would be the 0.7 micrograms per liter for cylindrospermopsin. Microsystems have not been detected in the finished water here. You should know that this is not just a Florida issue or a West Palm Beach issue. In fact, it's a nationwide challenge. And it really kind of burst onto the scene back in 2014 in Toledo, Ohio. You may remember reading newspapers or seeing it on the evening news, but there was a massive outbreak in Lake Erie. And you can see in those 2 photos there on the right, in just 4 days' time, large parts of Lake Erie exhibited a huge cyanotoxin bloom. It did make national headlines. It was all over the papers. And the reason this became an issue is because most water treatment plants were built before cyanotoxins were an issue. So they weren't really designed to remove cyanotoxins. Several states are implementing standards or guidelines and talking about it, but not all of them. And just like to point out right now that there are no current water quality standards or monitoring requirements for cyanotoxins in Florida. Okay, so the panel was brought together and we have 3 main goals. The first is to manage come up with recommendations to help the utility manage water sources, to make sure that the best water quality enters the treatment plant. Also, to optimize the performance of the treatment plants, the multi-barrier treatment steps that are in there. And by multi-barrier, I mean there's several different processes, and I'll go through those in a minute, and some of those processes can remove the same type of organism or the same type of contaminant. So that's multi-barrier treatment. And then maintain that high-quality water in the distribution system. A few guiding principles were developed as we kind of go through here, and these are principles that best practices that utilities around the country use. And that is first, to strive to produce the highest quality water possible. Secondly, is to maintain a holistic source-to-tap perspective. So we don't want to just focus in on one area, but you really want to optimize the overall system all the way from the water sources to the tap. And then leverage the multiple treatment barriers, which increases the robustness of the process. And so our scope is to review the recent event that associated with the cylindrospermopsin detection in May, to analyze the source water and treatment infrastructure and operations, and to provide near and long-term recommendations. And I would like to point out that the utility staff have been great working with. They share all the information, they talk with us candidly. And what the city did is they identified, isolated, and treated the harmful algal bloom. They turned on supplemental groundwater wells to help improve water quality. They initiated other management steps. modified the water treatment steps to remove and destroy cyanotoxins. And then they purchased a cyanotox screening tool, which allows them to collect a lot of samples and really get a good picture on what's going on in the source waters and in the plant. And they increased the water quality monitoring. And these steps, the panel all concurs, were the right steps, and they really did a great job implementing all of this. So the utility should be commended for that. So some of our initial preliminary observations are, first of all, the city has a vast amount of data, and it's very well organized, and it made our job a lot easier to get that data and take a nice good look at it. The source water system that you have is dynamic, well understood, and rigorously documented. In the figure to the right, kind of a cartoon, it shows the water system. And it's, first I'd like to point out, it's a rainfall-driven system. Okay, so the rainwater's collected, falls into the grassy waters preserve. There's a canal that can bring water into the system as well. There's several control structures along the way. And then there's also wells that aren't shown on here. All that water ultimately ends up in Lake Magnolia and then Clear Lake, where it's withdrawn, treated at the plant, and then sent out to customers. So it's a complex system, and there's a lot of options that the city has. And so one of the panel goals is to take a look at that and figure out if there's a way to optimize water quality. So just a little about the treatment plant that you have at the facility. This plant is what's called a conventional treatment plant, and it was really designed to primarily remove pathogens and turbidity. And pathogens are disease-causing organisms, right? So you want to make sure that the water is safe from a pathogen perspective. That's job one. Also want to remove natural organic matter in the water, and that natural organic matter that comes from decayed leaves and vegetation and maybe made by algae. And that organic matter itself is not harmful, but when we add chlorine to it, it can form disinfection byproducts. And so there's regulations on how much disinfection byproducts can be in a finished water. So it's a balance between removing organic matter and providing adequate disinfection that the plant has to deal with. And then this process also can remove any dissolved metals like iron or manganese that might be in the water. And the way it works is the water enters the plant, and then chemicals are added to adjust the pH of the water, to destabilize particles that are in the water and react with organic matter. And that's the coagulation flocculation step. And then as the water moves from that step, the flocculation actually imparts gentle mixing, and it allows particles to bump into each other and grow larger. And then those particles get removed in the sedimentation basins. From there, the water flows to filtration, which is granular media filtration, and any particles that weren't removed in the sedimentation step are then removed in filtration. After that, the water is chlorinated to provide pathogen perspective, so it's disinfected. Corrosion control chemicals are added to protect against lead and copper in the distribution system. Okay? And that's a conventional water treatment plant. Now, a couple of years ago, the city proactively installed two other processes. One is powdered activated carbon contact basin, and that's an adsorption process. And so powdered activated carbon, it's like ground up charcoal. You add that to the water, and it can absorb organic contaminants. So it's often used for taste and odors. So in the event that there might be a taste and odor event one day, there's some protection for that. It also can be used to absorb algal toxins. And then there's competition between the background natural organic matter that's already in the water. But that's a nice proactive step the utility did. They also installed UV disinfection to bolster the disinfection step from better protection against pathogens as well. Okay, so the near-term recommendations that the committee's come up with so far are to, first of all, continue to look at the source water. It is a complex system, and we want to better understand and see if there's ways to alter the source water withdrawals or the management of the overall source water to produce better source water that comes into the treatment plant. And then focusing on the treatment plant, the two processes that the plant has, that are the workhorses, so to speak, for removing algotoxins are the powdered activated carbon that I talked about. And then chlorine can also oxidize algotoxins as well. But there's a balance between that and then a production of DBPs. And so the source water actions that are underway, the panel has been working with the modeling team to evaluate the water quantity, water quality, and source water management strategies, to look to see if there's ways that we could perhaps operate the overall raw water system in a way that would improve water quality. And that's whether to turn off some sources at certain times of the year, what level should the lakes be kept at to improve water quality, is there a better depth to pull water from Clear Lake, and are there any potential lake treatments that could be implemented to help improve the raw water quality. And then moving on to the treatment plant itself, we've been working with the plant operators to maximize the effectiveness of those two steps, the powdered activated carbon and the chlorine treatment. A bunch of modeling has been done using a Cyanotox tool by AWWA, and those results show good potential to remove more cyanotoxins under the right conditions. And then treatability studies are recommended to, and will be starting up soon, to identify the best type of powdered activated carbon. There's all sorts of them on the market. Are some better than others that would work on your particular supply? And then to test alternative chlorination schemes and the impact of those on disinfection byproducts. You don't want to solve one problem and then cause another one. So the takeaways: the city continues to sample weekly with no cyanotoxin detections in the drinking water. That's great news. Shows the treatment has been working. The near-term actions are focusing on optimizing the available tools, and that is optimizing the powdered activated carbon dose, adjusting the pH at the point of chlorine application, because chlorine is an oxidant against cyanotoxins, but it's highly pH dependent, so we have to be in the right pH range. And then increasing the post-chlorine dose as much as possible while balancing DBP formation. And lastly, now we're starting to focus our attention more on long-term actions that may be warranted in the future. Those would include capital projects such as Ozone or the installation of advanced oxidation products, and changes in source water management. And that's really all I had. I'd like to turn it back over to Libby now to talk about the cool website.
Thank you, Dr. Becker. Before we go any further, I've just been advised that we were live streaming this, and apparently there's a problem with the live stream. So if anyone in here, obviously they can't hear me saying this, but I just did want to announce that it is showing fine on our internal channel, WPB-TV 18. It is being taped, so at some point later, if folks weren't able to see this presentation, they could certainly see the taped version. If you know of anyone that might be trying to watch it on live stream, you might want to text them and tell them that they can turn to TV 18. But I just want to make that announcement. Sorry. Our information technology team is working on it. Hopefully it'll get back up, but right now it's not working as well as it should be. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Another near-term recommendation is to share information about the city's water system. So we have been working with city staff on and have launched a new page called Protecting Water Quality Source to Tap. And this page covers, I was scrolling it like it was a live web page there. This website covers, shares information about the city's source water, how filtration works, how water is stored and treated before it's put into the distribution system, and the steps in the distribution for monitoring and treating all the way from your source to the water that comes out of your tap. We also have created a cyanotoxin expert panel site where your water customers can learn about the panel. We will be updating this page with information of the expert panel's work. And we also on this page have some frequently asked questions about the work and cyanotoxins. And I'm excited to announce too that this week we will be launching a water quality dashboard that will focus on cyanotoxin results. So it will be updated every time that the treatment plant gets new cyanotoxin results, and also has some information that explains what the results mean and very clearly shows if water is safe to drink or if there would be an advisory. So looking forward, the expert panel will continue to work with city staff on those near-term actions. You know, those are underway, and we'll have some immediate results for the treatment plant operations. Immediate over the next few months, they'll be learning more about ways to optimize the treatment. Long-term solutions, the expert panel will be meeting monthly through February of 2022 or March, potentially, to look at the longer-term solutions that we had discussed, maybe capital improvements or other solutions for the long-term, sustainable, reliable solutions for your water treatment plant. And even though those are just monthly meetings, there are have been and will continue these small subgroups. Remember Bill pointed out those technical teams, they've been meeting weekly with staff to kind of dig deep into different topics that the expert panel is covering. And we plan to update the community at key milestones along the way, and you too, of course. So with that, thank you, and the panel is ready to answer your questions.
Thank you all very much for that report, and we'll open it up to questions from the Commission. President Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor, and I want to apologize to everyone for coming in late. Thank you for the presentation. We appreciate all the work you're doing. There's really nothing more important to a municipality such as ours than the quality and safety of our drinking water. I see that you've made a number of suggestions and recommendations for moving forward to make sure our system is, more robust and more resilient. Is it not true, though, that even though we do these things and we follow the best practices, there's still potentially going to be instances where we have to have public notifications and or advisories? Is that still going to be the case regardless of what we do?
Well, it's certainly possible that there could always be some event that happens outside of the, the normal water quality range. I can't sit here today and guarantee that there would never be another issue of some sort that occurs. It does happen in water treatment plants from time to time. That's why EPA has public notification rules and all that to account for that type of thing.
So I guess the goal is, though, to lessen the number of times that actually happens.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a risk. It's all a risk. You have to balance how much money you want to spend on improvements in a treatment plant versus the risk of having some sort of a water quality event that could occur.
Okay, follow up, Mayor.
Yes.
Since these events will likely occur in the future, is there anything that our residents can do at their own homes to insulate themselves from the inconveniences or potential health effects, when these events do happen? Can they install reverse osmosis systems? Do they work to take out cyanotoxins? I know that I was feeling pretty good about myself because I had a reverse osmosis system in my house, and we continued drinking the water. Hopefully I made the right decision by continuing to drink the water. But can you talk a little bit about that, of things that maybe people could do to make their own homes more resilient?
Yeah, a properly purchased and installed and maintained point of use device like RO would certainly protect you as long as it's properly maintained. And I do stress that because a lot of
Doctor,
people.
could you speak a little closer to the mic, please? Are they on?
It's hard with this. Some point of use devices work better than others. A lot of people might put in a granular activated carbon little thing on a tap, and if you don't change that frequently enough, then it can actually accumulate contaminants and then release them in greater quantities. So you have to make sure you're maintaining your own home device. If you put an RO, that is one of the technologies that would remove those chemicals that I've shown you up there. They won't go through an RO membrane. So.
But I think
Commissioner Lambert.
this mic hot.
I don't think so.
Okay.
There we go.
I just wanted to add that, that is the case, but our charge here is to make your system reliable and robust, to really minimize the chance of that happening so that all of the citizens in the city are able to drink tap water all the time.
Good point.
Anybody else from the panel want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, can I?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Just wanted to mention that what we've started doing, Commissioner, is we have, as you heard, that there were a monitoring tool. So what we can do is we take samples from within the treatment plant at different times. So if you're seeing something come in, we can be more proactive in changing anything in the treatment. That's the ELISA method that we've employed. It tends to overestimate, but that also gives you a little bit more advanced notice. If you're seeing your source water go up, toxins go up, then we can work through some of the things. Obviously, if the toxins are really, really high amount and the treatment is not possible to remove it at that point, that's why the public health advisories are there. And then the 10-day advisories are for that reason, because you can do, it's not a chronic, it's a chronic effect, it's not an acute effect usually with these toxins at this level, at the health advisory levels. So then you can go in and start doing other treatments, whether it's doing chlorination in the distribution system so that you can remove the toxin from the distribution system. So those are some of the other steps that we will continue to do and monitor. So.
Commissioner Lambert?
Thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you for the work that you're doing and that you continue to do. It's great to see the results, and especially the focus on our treatment systems. I appreciated the comment that you made that we don't want to solve one problem just to cause another, and so evaluating even the treatments that we have in place to see if there's new technologies or ways that we can improve that. I appreciate it, as well as our communications to residents and stakeholders. The new website looks great, and I appreciate the dashboard, and appreciate that we are going to err on the side of caution with those numbers there. I'm curious if your research went into, or the other groups that you mentioned, took into account our unique water system here with grassy waters and the fresh water that we take in. Are we at more risk because of that? And would love to hear your evaluation on that system.
Yeah, that part of the study isn't yet complete. There are a lot of people looking at the source water. So, in Florida in general, you have shallow water bodies, and there's a lot of nutrients in them. So, and it's warm. You're going to grow algae. I mean, you're always going to have some type of algae in there. The goal is to prevent the growth of the blue-green algae that cause these cyanotoxins.
And so will your research give us some suggestions, or I know that the city is already taking actions to mitigate that risk, but I don't know if this group will also look into that?
Yeah, we're looking at things like, what level should the lakes be kept? Is it beneficial to pump more groundwater into the system? All those things are being currently evaluated.
Thank you.
So that is a focus. We are looking source to tap. So one of our goals is to evaluate and try to determine strategies to provide the best source water coming into the treatment plant.
I can add just a little bit. We have a couple of modeling efforts that we were doing, so we've brought those modelers to sit down with the expert panelists so that everybody can look at everything together, so nobody's working in silos. So they can tell them what kind of things that they've been looking at for modeling and what can be done, and we can learn from the expert panelists. We are also we are participating in a Water Research Foundation project, which is looking at are there trigger mechanisms, looking at all the data, and this is a nationwide effort from the Water Research Foundation. We are one of the 3 utilities in Florida that is participating. There are 30 total utilities that are participating. And Carollo Engineering, Dr. Cushing's firm, is working with all of these utilities to get all the data, bring it into like an AI setting, and look at whether they can be predictive and trigger mechanisms. So we're going to participate in that and see whether those can there be trigger mechanisms for us that'll tell us that there is a chance of algal bloom and the chances are higher, and can you do something slightly different or change sources, as Dr. Becker and Dr. Cushing was saying.
Well, thank you. I'm certainly appreciative that we are employing so many different resources and experts and situations from around the U.S. to help us to make good decisions for our water here and for our residents. Thank you.
Commissioner Fox.
Thank you so much for your presentation and the updates today. And also, it's great to see Scott Kelly, our former assistant city administrator, on this panel. I know he has such a strong history and background with water utilities. My question was, in one of the slides it mentioned that many other states are implementing standards, but the state of Florida is not looking at any kind of standards, I guess, to implement for our water. So I'm wondering if our city can implement our own standards, or should we be looking at what other states are doing? I mean, are there other things besides these toxins that we should be looking out for in the future that might be regulated in other states but not ours? So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Actually, Libby, do you want to address that and talk of it from the Salem perspective? In terms of, I think that inherently the city is going to be a trendsetter, and what you come up with will be the model for future regulations, and that's what Libby went through in Salem.
Yeah, that's, thank you. That is true. Salem, when they had their cyanotoxin event, it was very similar to yours in that the state did not have regulations at that time to deal with it. But from that event, the state of Oregon did develop cyanotoxin monitoring rules and reporting rules that now guide the entire state of Oregon.
I guess, sorry, I'll talk fast. I guess my perspective is some states do go ahead and set their own rules. I kind of caution against that because a lot of them are just politically driven rules, quite frankly, without a lot of science behind it. So I would tend to look at what EPA does. And, they are in the process of moving forward with uncontaminated regularity rule. They will end up as regulations at some point. So I would tend to go with that. You could look at Oregon's numbers. You could also look at Ohio's. I think those are the states that currently have them. California is developing something, but they tend to go way beyond whatever the normal science says, quite frankly. And I'd be careful of that because that could make you put in processes that would incur massive capital for really no scientific benefit, I guess, is my 2 cents on that. It might not be popular, but that's my view.
Did you want to? Commissioner Fox, thank you for your question. Yes, we are always looking at what are emerging contaminants that we need to look at, whether our system is vulnerable to any of those, what kind of rules are coming down in the pike through EPA. So on a regular basis, the lab, the water plant, and we attend webinars and look at what EPA is bringing, and we have also asked the expert panel for any advice or anything else that they're seeing other places that if we need to look at those. So we continue to do that on a regular basis. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, Scott Kelly. I I think what's important about having the expert panel is they bring advice from their experience from other states, other municipal governments, because we're not the first utility that experienced this. I mean, it's been a number of utilities from around the country. We're the first one in Florida. So it's important that we look at the experience of others. We look at what those, what countermeasures they took, what precautions, how did they communicate with their customers, all the things that I think that are important for us to learn from. And that's why we really wanted to make sure we brought the expert panel in, so that we don't have to, we get a leg up in the fact that we have their experience behind us. And this has exceeded my expectations in regard to looking at reducing risk. I think that's what's really important. It's a risk issue. It's a health risk issue. And certainly we don't want to put that public at risk. So we're minimizing whatever risk that is out there. And it's not just, one contaminant. It could be other things. And so, that we don't even know about. So we want to make sure that we address minimizing risk now and into the future. And I think they've done an excellent job of doing that. And I think the city's in a good position now. Not to say that we can never have another event, but I think the risk has really been dramatically minimized through the work that's been done.
Did you have a follow-up, Commissioner? I have a quick question. Libby, you made mention, and it was also in the presentation, about Oregon. What has their experience been since that event in 2014? Have they had reoccurrences? How frequent?
Yeah, so the city of Salem, again, very similar to your system. They had their cyanotoxin event after, 80 years of never having a single instance of it. The cyanotoxins, the blue-green algae population in the reservoir had 2 species. Now there's 9 or 10 species of blue-green algae that have potential to produce toxins. They have toxins were coming through their treatment plant, but much like what you're doing, they optimized their chlorine treatment. They added the PAC, the same thing that you have at your treatment plant, and they did that for 2 years while they built their long-term sustainable treatment for this toxin that is likely not going away. They built an ozone treatment facility, added it to their chain of treatment steps. And so that we just had a ribbon cutting event for that 3 weeks ago, but it was a long process, almost 3 years, 3 years long. But the conclusion they came to was that this is not going to go away anytime soon. And they, but they were able to, with the chlorine treatment and the PAC, to not have another event at the city. But a lot of worry over those years till the ozone went in.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll circle back around. President Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. Could you speak a little bit with regard to our water treatment facility, the condition that it's in, whether it's able to handle, the purification that we're going to require moving forward, the technology that we utilize currently? I know you went over some of it, but would that technology be considered the gold standard or state of the art, if you will, if there is such a standard? And then if it's not, are there any alternatives? Is there something, regardless of cost even, that would be better or that could help us avoid situations like this in the future?
I think it comes down to what Scott was saying about risk. And, the plant, we did tour it the other day. It looks like it's well-maintained, great shape. So that's kudos to the operators for that. A lot of plants are not. The processes, as I said, this is a conventional plant at the backbone. It's got some powdered activated carbon, it's got UV disinfection. You know, the gold standard might be putting ozone in. It might be having a, you know, I don't think you would put a nanofiltration or a RO system here. You would waste too much water doing that. You know, so the long-term decision, the long-term decision, I think, is going to be, you know, do you put ozone in or not? Because it's not a trivial matter. You have to figure out how to fit it into the process, and there will be significant costs, you know, tens of millions of dollars to put something like ozone in, and then you have to operate it. And there's operational costs because it takes quite a bit of power, and you have to buy liquid oxygen, which right now it's hard to get. So.
And I think just to add some perspective, the vast majority of surface water treatment plants in Florida across the U.S. use conventional treatment like you have. So it is the standard. In fact, you've got some processes like the PAC contact chamber and the UV disinfection that are pretty unique. And in the case of UV, it really is state-of-the-art disinfection. The other thing is it's in very good condition. It's well-maintained, well-operated. And so you've got a valuable asset there. So I think our charge is going to be to, as much as possible, work with that good infrastructure that you have and build on that.
Thank you. And follow-up, Mayor?
Yes.
That you answered the question, my next question, which was going to be that, you know, given that we have this surface water drinking system and we utilize a conventional system of purification, is that is that a standard? And so I think you answered that question. So if I understand you correctly, that the UV sterilization is certainly part of a gold standard probably, but that adding ozone could even take it further with regard to purification of the water?
That's true. You're the only large surface water system in the state of Florida that has UV disinfection, so it really is a nice add-on. And then, as Bill indicated, we're gonna look at a broad cross-section of tools, but ozonation is something that's used broadly at other plants, surface water plants in Florida, and is broadly effective on cyanotoxins generally and other water quality concerns that you might have.
One follow-up, Mayor?
Yeah, but let me ask a quick. So there are other surface water systems in Florida that do use ozone currently?
That's correct. If we look around the state, there are probably 7 or 8 surface water systems that are of your size.
Okay.
And similar source water. City of Tampa has ozone, Tampa Bay Water has ozone, but Peace River does not have ozone, Manatee County does not have ozone, so it's, it's probably more the exception than the rule here in Florida. But in other places, like North Carolina or Virginia that have similar water quality, you'd see more plants with ozone than without. So it's also kind of a regional thing.
Okay. With you. Yes, President.
Thank you. You had mentioned reverse osmosis and nanofiltration. Where would they fit in with, with comparing them to the ozonation or the UV sanitation of the water? Is it possible to utilize nanofiltration or reverse osmosis filtration on such a large scale, and do any other utilities utilize it?
Typically not for surface water. Surface water treatment with those types of high-pressure membranes are difficult because of the biological fouling that's inherent. So it becomes very challenging. The other thing is you would have to go to reverse osmosis because the molecular weight cutoff for most nanofiltration membranes wouldn't be sufficient. Cost would be really high, capital and operating. We'd waste a lot of water because the recovery would be 70 to 80%, so you'd be wasting 25 to 30% of the water that you brought from the source. So it's possible, but it's very rare for a surface water system like yours to use those high-pressure membranes. Bill?
Yeah, I don't know any plants. You know, the Tampa Bay Water has a desalination plant that uses RO technology, but that's for desalination, not for just regular surface water treatment. I think it would be cost prohibitive and nightmare to maintain, and you have to get the pretreatment just right. Like Bob was saying, it'd be, not efficient.
So if I understand you correctly, then we should probably be looking at ozonation as a potential if we were to upgrade it for the future.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you. Mayor, this may have been mentioned in the beginning. This is an update. Is this, how long is this task force commissioned for?
Well, until they get the job done, and I believe there was one slide that showed that they're probably going to continue meeting until, February of next year.
Okay, great. So it sounds like maybe some of these recommendations that Commissioner Peduzzi was asking about, you are still working on and will be coming forward with those recommendations as well?
Yes.
Okay, great. And Mr. Kelly, thank you so much for bringing up, I think, one of our top priorities is mitigating the risk for our city. And I just want to make sure I jotted down a few points here. I think that what you all have identified is some areas for improvement, alerting, being more aware sooner and putting things in place so that we're, as a city, aware sooner. More frequent and transparent updates through the dashboard, optimizing the treatment steps that you mentioned, and then just this continued evaluation. Did I capture it all? Or, I know we don't have a crystal ball to see what future issues may come about to our water, but I think that those are definitely good steps to help us to mitigate that risk. So thank you.
Commissioner Fox, did you have any other questions? President Peduzzi?
Thank you, Mayor. I know that you spoke about, or it was on the one of the slides, about a holistic approach to this, that you're trying to look at the big picture. And I think all of us have had constituents ask us about, the source of the water and the fact that, there's not many areas that are utilizing the surface, water for their primary supply. And I don't know that you're in a position to talk about this, but have you been asked to look at the source of our water and alternatives to the source of our water, such as the deep wells and things like that? I know that we talked about maybe including more of the deep well water into the system at times. But what about the source just in general of our water?
We haven't really been asked to look at deep well water or anything like that. It's more, is there a way to optimize the management of the water sources that you currently have? Is what our scope has been.
But it certainly could be and may be something that we look at in terms of the longer term solutions. The focus right now has been the shorter term, optimizing the existing infrastructure and assets. But we certainly could for the longer term.
Yeah, if I could add to that, believe it or not, even though there are some very large utilities in the state of Florida that use surface water, like Tampa Bay Water, 150 million gallon a day plant. City of Tampa uses surface water. And there's risk always associated with whatever source you utilize. The sustainability of groundwater is being questioned all over the state. So, in fact, there's utilities that are switching now to surface water because of the fact that it's more sustainable and that they cannot get permitted to be able to use groundwater. So, even though obviously groundwater is easier to treat and to deal with, I think long term you're going to see a lot more reliance on surface water in that regard. So knowing that there's surface water, we need to make sure though that when we utilize surface water that it's, we mitigate the risk associated with anything. Just like there's contaminants in groundwater. I mean, it's not that groundwater utilities have to mitigate on occasion. So, it's examining, understanding what source water we're using, putting countermeasures in place, making sure that we have early warning before an incident may occur, so that we can mitigate that incident before it occur, hopefully mitigate it before it may occur. So these are the steps that we're trying to look at that will ensure the highest quality water and have the greatest reduction in risk. Because I really feel like that you're not going to be able to permit the necessary groundwater. So I've heard, hey, let's just switch to groundwater. I don't think that you would be able to permit that based on my knowledge today. In fact, like City of Orlando's having to cut back, JEA in Jacksonville, the utility that serves Northeast Florida, just about every utility, large utility, is having to cut back on their groundwater withdrawals. So they're actually going to the extent of treating wastewater, injecting it in the ground, indirect potable reuse. So, so that they can end up having sufficient water supply for future growth. And that's the advantage that we have, is that we already have a permitted allocation of surface water that's pretty high quality. It's got its challenges, but it's pretty high quality that we can utilize moving forward, because we need to meet the needs of the community now and into the future. So, I guess that's my answer to why don't we just switch to groundwater? It's just simpler and easier, and it's not simple, and it's not easier, and the future is not going that way.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I assume that, I know that there's questions about the feasibility of us accessing the aquifer, and that my understanding is the South Florida Water Management District actually is the one that permits the utilization of the aquifer or tapping into the aquifer.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah.
That's correct. And, right now, there's no water to be allocated out of that aquifer except on supplemental basis, which we have, because we do have groundwater available to us on a supplemental basis. And these experts are looking at, if we augment with groundwater during certain periods of time, would that reduce the risk of the formation of these algal toxins? And I think the answer is probably yes. They're going to, give us opinions on that, about the right combination of source waters, because we have several source waters we draw from. We have 7 different sources of water that we draw from, whether it be grassy water or regional water, whatever. Well fields, we got 2 different well fields. So we have different sources, and what's the right combination, again, to meet the needs of the community. So.
And I assume that the rest of the county is utilizing the aquifer for their drinking water.
Yeah, yes. In this county, utilities are utilizing groundwater. Sometimes it's deep wells that they have to, it's got high salt content in that water. Some of it is shallow aquifer wells. So it just depends on the utility. But yes, in this county, they're using groundwater.
I think it's just a little difficult for me to comprehend how everyone else can access the aquifer, but because we've been utilizing a groundwater or surface water source, that we would be prohibited from accessing that aquifer ourselves. When we probably contribute as much, if not more than anyone, in replenishing the water in the aquifer through grassy waters and everything else. I assume that's how the water gets into the aquifer. It gets filtered naturally from the surface down into the aquifer. So I don't know. I guess it's something politically that needs to be looked at too. And we need to see also, is there really a problem with the aquifer and the quantity of water that it can produce? And if adding one additional city, which is 1/10 of the population of Palm Beach County, if that would really have a negative impact on the aquifer. But I guess that's a discussion for some time down the road, because switching is probably not an option right now.
Well, the water was allocated many years ago, So there's not sufficient water because the water's now being directed for restoration of the Everglades and that sort of thing. So there's not really water to be allocated within our basin, whether it's surface or groundwater. But yeah, we'll look at whether we could, during certain times of the year, could we utilize more groundwater without having any adverse impact on the environment. I mean, that's one of the considerations that's being done. That's what Poonam was discussing in regard to us modeling the system. So we're doing modeling both of water quality and quantity of the system to see what's available, what could be reasonably, and if we can determine that there's additional groundwater to be had through efficiencies and that sort of thing, certainly we'll be asking for that because it's just an additional source for us then. So.
Thank you.
And isn't that one of the mitigation measures we used post-event is getting more or getting permission to use more groundwater from the eastern well fields, correct?
Yes, eastern and western well field. But what we're looking at now, could we even pull more water from those well fields without causing adverse environmental impact on a standby basis, not on a continuous basis? But you know, that would also then tie into water quality, because if there's times when the water quality, we need to, you know, mix and blend the water to improve water quality, then we would have that as another tool available.
And Commissioner Peduzzi, you said it really well that yes, surface waters actually recharge the aquifer. So we are recharging all the time. So that is something that we want to look into as we're doing this modeling, that can we get credit for some of that recharging? Usually it's considered seepage by South Florida Water Management District, but there is something to be said, the way the lake levels are, grassy waters, those levels keep all the salt water totally at bay. Yes, we are on a ridge, that helps, but the levels that we have, those are so much more higher that there's no chance of any saltwater intrusion. You stop keeping this as a surface water supply for this area, there will be repercussions down the road for the whole region and the area if that's done. So.
Thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? Well, listen, this has been very informative. I appreciate all the work that you and the other members of the panel, as well as the subcommittees, have put into this effort. We look forward to hearing more from you at the appropriate time. But thank you again, and keep up the good work.
Well, thank you. We, you know, Bill and Chandra and I have spent our whole careers focusing on solving challenges to provide safe, clean water, and it's a privilege to work with you on this.
Thank you. I don't have any mayor's matters. Commissioners, do you have any thing for the good of the body? Okay, well, this meeting is adjourned. I know we have a special meeting commission at 4 p.m. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.